Okay, so this is the latest project. Haven't even taken it off the trail yet. This is a Big Dog Stout 48-inch mower. This is a low-end commercial unit. As best I can tell, this is basically a rebranded Hustler Fastrak. It's made by Excel Industries. There's the tag right there. It's got a manufacture date of 2016. So it's only about 3 years old. I don't know if this was used commercially or not. I'm thinking maybe not, because if you look at the deck, you notice we have a hole in the back here, and this spot right here is just worn really thin. All the spots where there's harsh turns are worn thin. What this tells me is that this was probably mowing a lot of sand. And my experience is that you often get that when you have homeowners trying to mow their lawn really short because they don't want to mow as often. But then again, 300 hours, it's got 600 hours over the course of 3 years, so it may have been used commercially. Not entirely sure. So it's got a number of problems. Few things need to be replaced. Obviously the tires will need to be replaced. They were clearly run while low on pressure until they wore funky like that. The engine, I am told, is brand new, and I believe him. It's not perfect. It looks like it was left out in the elements. We got a little bit of rust here and there, but it seems that whoever put the engine in kind of gave up partway through, because if you look underneath, the engine is bolted in. Come on, brighten up a little bit. So, get this thing to cooperate. So the engine is bolted down, but you notice none of the belts or pulleys or anything are connected, and the blade clutch is actually missing. So they got it in, and I think they were having electrical problems with it, and then eventually abandoned it. The reason I say that is we've got two wires here, very poorly hacked into the ignition switch wiring, and these wires go to the starter solenoid and the anti-afterfire solenoid. Also, you notice that this cover is loose, and obviously that screen is missing. When I opened this up, what I found is that they disconnected the ground wires for both coils. What that means is that there's no way to ground out the coils and kill the spark to turn the engine off. So that says to me that they were having trouble getting it going due to electrical problems. We've also got, you notice that this carburetor linkage is not connected to the throttle. Excuse me. This carburetor linkage is not connected to the throttle for some reason. So we do have some funny stuff going on, but I do believe that this is a brand new engine. And if I look at the oil, he claims it's never been run, and I believe it. That oil is perfectly clear. That looks like exactly what it would look like coming straight out of the bottle. So I don't think this engine's actually been run. The hydros, which are very important. This mower uses ZT 3100 hydro gear axles or transmission assemblies. Unfortunately, the reservoirs were dry, so I couldn't really tell what the fluid was like, but that leaked out on the way home. And you can see it's a little bit dark, but I don't see any major debris. There is a little debris, but I think that's organic. I think like a bug or something crawled into it. It doesn't appear to be something that came out of the hydros. So hopefully those are in good condition. So it's got a few small issues, but overall nothing too serious. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on getting this engine running first and foremost. Then we'll get to the hydros connected, put some fluid in those, and then we'll try to get it off this trailer. I'm not going to take it off right now, because if I do, it rolls into the street, and this thing weighs about 800 pounds, and it's got hydros, so the chances of me actually being able to get it up to my garage with anything else that I own is not great, so I'm not even going to try. We're going to just get the engine running. We'll throw a pulley on there, connect the hydros, and then see if we can get it off. So for the linkage, there's clearly supposed to be like a plastic clip there or something, but to just hold it in for now, I went ahead and stuck it through the hole and then connected the spring on the other side, so that should keep it in there at least enough to try to start it. It's got oil in it, so All the ground wires are connected. The shroud isn't bolted down fully all the way, but we're going to find out if we can get it running before we worry about that. So surprisingly, this battery does have juice, so let's see what happens. Choke on. Let's give it a little prime. This will tell us if it's getting spark, which will therefore rule out any potential issues with the electronics. So it has spark, but there's no fuel on the spark plugs. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on. We'll try this again. Hopefully it doesn't have compression issues. Well, that ain't good. Okay, I'm leaning towards something's wrong with the valves because I can feel pressure coming out the exhaust, but nothing's really happening on the intake except a slight bit of pressure. Okay, I'm thinking something's up with the valves. I'm getting pressure out of the intake and very little pressure out the exhaust. So we're gonna have to tear into this thing. Okay, so I figured out what's wrong with the engine, and it definitely qualifies as weird. As I suspected, we have valve issues. The push rod isn't in the rocker on this side, but it gets even weirder. On this side, the push rod just came out with this valve cover. Neither of the push rods were in on this side. No wonder it doesn't start, but the question is, why are the push rods not in on a brand new engine? I don't know, but we'll stick them back in, see if she fires. I bet she will. Okay, well, I have no idea how the push rods managed to come off the rockers on both sides of the engine on a brand new engine, but they did, and that's probably why they decided to give up on it. So I'll try it now, and hopefully she should start. Well, that doesn't sound particularly good. Well, things have gone from not so great to worse. So, the whole theory about this being a brand new engine that sat out on the elements for a while, yeah, that's kind of gone out the window now. I don't know why the thing looks so clean, but it's pretty obvious that this is not a brand new engine. Someone's been in here before and they've done some shoddy stuff. As I started taking it off and tearing it down, I saw evidence everywhere of shoddy workmanship. This bolt right here, this pinch bolt, looks like it was over tightened. This bolt here, I think it's supposed to be threaded into this bracket, and it was just kind of stripped. It will not tighten down at all. one nut holding the exhaust on this side. Before I even got the sump off, I could tell it had been opened because this is not a very good RTV job. This clearly was not done at the factory. The sump has some buildup in the bottom, so clearly that's not brand new. And then you can see plainly that this engine has had moisture in it at some point because we've got some rust buildup on the crank and on the bearing surfaces. We've also got some buildup in the oil gallery. So yeah, this is definitely not a new engine. But the good news is we should be able to salvage it. And I have found the source of the knocking. So if you come down here, you see that? That is the connecting rod cap bolt that holds the cap on the connecting rod, and it is completely loose and almost completely backed out, and the cap is totally loose. This is what our knocking noise was, and this is actually why the knocking, it wasn't knocking at first, but as I kept trying to get it going, slowly it got worse and worse to the point where I could hear the knocking even when just cranking it. So what that says to me is somebody probably took this apart, put this back together, and never torqued that down. And so that's why it's loose now. But, like I said, the good news is that it doesn't seem to have any other problems. So we should be able to fix this. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take off both rods. We're going to check the bearing surfaces. If they're in good shape, we should be able to just tighten the bolts back down. This cover is meant to have RTV, I believe, because it has these grooves in it for RTV to sit in. So we can just reseal it with RTV, put it back on the mower, and hopefully she should be good to go. Okay, so it's gone from bad to worse. So all the bolts on both caps were only finger tight. They weren't even torqued down. So this is the one that didn't loosen up. It might not look so great on camera, but the surface does seem to be smooth, so that one should be fine. The problem is with the one that came loose. So here's the cap from that one, and it's pretty beat up. And I pulled the cylinder, the piston and the rod out, because if you look at that, it's really beat up. The surface is actually very rough on the connecting rod. And we've actually had we've had aluminum transfer from the rod on to the crankshaft. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to take the crankshaft out, get the aluminum off the crankshaft, and I'm going to have to get a new rod. This is honestly quite perplexing because if you look at the piston and the rings and everything, they look all brand new. I mean, the cylinder has lots of crosshatch. It looks brand new. The head looks brand new, but clearly someone was in here at some point and did not torque down the rods. So I'm not really sure how that all works, but now I'm going to have to get the crankshaft out, get the aluminum off it. We're going to have to order a new rod, new head gasket, wait for all that to get here before you can put it back together, put it back on the mower, and find out if the hydros work. So this is going really well so far. So I didn't really want to have to wait for all the parts to come in and get the engine all back together before I can find out if the hydros are any good in this thing, and I want to be able to move it around before then. So I came up with this idea. Now this is an 18 horsepower Briggs & Stratton V-twin Intech. Now this engine cannot serve as a replacement for the Kawasaki that came out of it because the output shaft on this engine is shorter and it is smaller, so none of the pulleys or the PTO clutch will fit onto this shaft. However, right now I don't even have an electric PTO clutch, so that doesn't matter to me. All that matters to me is that I can run the hydros and find out if they work. So what I found is that a Craftsman YS4500 double pulley is actually close enough to the size of the stock pulley for the hydros that it will actually work in this mower. I actually have it all put together right now, and it will drive the hydros, so I can drive this thing around and see if the hydros work before I get the other engine all back together. Now this is just kind of shoehorned in here. The bolt pattern does line up on this engine, thankfully. So the only wire we've actually got connected to this engine is the anti-afterfire solenoid. So we turn the key on and the solenoid will kick on and allow fuel flow, and when we turn it off, it doesn't kill the ignition, it doesn't kill the spark. Instead, it'll just shut off flow to the afterfire solenoid, and then a few seconds later it dies. The only other wire that's connected is the starter wire, and then we just have fuel. I did connect the choke and throttle up because that was quick and easy, and that's pretty much about it. There is no muffler on it, so this is going to be extremely loud when it starts up, but as long as it works, that's all I'm concerned with. Well, it's nice to have some good news after that whole engine fiasco. Turns out the hydros seem to be in great shape. I was concerned at first that that one of them was weaker than the other, but it turns out it's just an adjustment. You see, if I push these all the way forward, this handle is out of adjustment and therefore is much farther forward than the other one. So that made me think that one of the hydros was weak. But it's not. They're in good shape. If you push them all the way to the forward stops or all the way to the reverse stops, it tracks nice and straight, no issues. They seem to have plenty of power. They didn't seem to get weaker at all after I had been riding it a while and the hydros warmed up, so that's all good news. I was a little bit concerned, especially about this hydro, because if you look down in there, you can see the top of the pulley, and there should actually be a fan on top of that pulley, but that fan is plastic and it has broken off. So I was a bit concerned that they may have broken off that fan and kept running it and overheated the hydro and damaged it. But it looks like they're in good shape. We will have to service them, of course, because who knows when that got done. So we'll change the fluid, filters, all that stuff. And you know, we'll just have to do a whole bunch of basic little tiny stuff all over the place, and then of course get the engine in shape. But yeah, this is great news. I can go ahead and start ordering parts, getting ready to work on the rest of this stuff. But that's where we're going to leave off until we get parts.